Last week, 63 House Republicans voted against a symbolic resolution of unequivocal support for NATO. Are your colleagues wrong on this one?
No, there's a strong support for NATO moving forward, always has been. NATO is the process of defending themselves, but the one thing we need to make sure these NATO countries spend the money more than 2%. In Romania, they're spending 2.5%. There is a desire there because they see on the forefront, on their borders, what is happening. We haven't seen any atrocities like this before since World War II. And there's no thought that Putin is going to stop here. What has Putin done? He's consolidated his troops. He's brought in one of the most ruthless generals out of Syria with one of the worst reputations to start entering, to try to take over the Black Sea, to control Ukraine, their inability to supply food to the world as well. This affects everybody. That's why we should stand up for Ukraine and provide them the weapons to defend themselves where Putin cannot continue to do these atrocities.
Oh, so there's a quote, strong support for NATO in the Republican Party, which is why 63 Republicans voted against a resolution affirming their support for NATO. Because when you support something, you vote against support resolutions. Did I get that right? If you were wondering what the definition of gaslighting was, it is Kevin McCarthy saying, with a straight face, that his conference supports NATO, despite the fact that when it came time to simply declare their support, a third of Republicans couldn't even bother to do that. It's not even like they were voting to spend money. This was nothing more than a symbolic resolution. And granted, whether symbolic resolutions are really worth spending our tax dollars on is an entirely separate issue altogether, but the point is that this was about as light a lift as it gets. And for those Republicans even to oppose that shows that as far as the GOP is concerned, it's safe to say that there's something of an issue when it comes to support for NATO and the democracies it's composed of. And that really is indicative of a larger problem on the right, in that many Republicans, not just the Marjorie Taylor Greene fringe wing of the party, but many Republicans have a fundamental opposition to democracy. The whole point of NATO is to serve as a military alliance for countries that promote democratic values. That's not to say that every member state is infallible and perfectly democratic, but that alliance has still proven vital for a number of the world's democracies. And it's especially valuable now when you've got Russia seeking to expand its territory by way of force. Notice how when Russia invades territory like Crimea and Georgia and Ukraine, they won't go near any NATO territory. That is not an accident. That alliance has been crucial in terms of deterrence in the face of a warmongering totalitarian dictator. And so you would think that the least we could do, not only as part of that alliance, but purportedly as supporters of democracies and not autocracies, is to offer the simple gesture of support for NATO. That a solid chunk of the Republican Party can't do that really does give the game away. And the reason is, simply enough, because those Republicans aren't interested in democracy, not abroad and not at home. The parallels between the Kremlin and the GOP have become all too obvious, from their reliance on disinformation, to their opposition to democratic governance, to their embrace of violence as a political tactic. That's why Trump and his former administration officials keep falling over themselves declaring their respect for Putin as a leader. That's why Fox News hosts like Tucker Carlson spent so much time declaring their support for Russia. And when even that became untenable, pivoted instead to suggesting that even if Russia isn't great, Ukraine is still just as bad. Any way you slice it, these Republicans are broadcasting their pro-Putin, pro-autocratic, anti-democracy tendencies. And so of course, all Kevin McCarthy can do is offer the most tepid statement of support for NATO before immediately pivoting to admonishing the alliance's member states for not spending enough. And sure, that's important, of course, and a number of those states have expeditiously ramped up their spending, but I find it especially telling that when we should be affirming our support for NATO, for Ukraine, for democracy across the world, if the best you've got is criticism for that alliance, then I'm pretty sure you're already betraying where you stand. And look, this doesn't have to be a partisan thing. It shouldn't be a partisan thing. Republican or Democrat, we all live in a democracy. We should want to live in a democracy. We should be outspoken in our support of democracies. We should want the world to live in democracies. Having those democracies across the world makes us all safer. We should want more Germanys and Frances and Canadas and Australias and the UKs and so on, and we should want fewer places like Russia. Even from an isolationist perspective, the fewer autocrats and dictators, the fewer conflicts, which means we don't have to waste our money fighting foreign wars and we can help more Americans here at home. So we should be calling for every Republican to breathlessly support this Democratic alliance. And the fact that the leader of the House GOP can't even manage to do that is a testament to not only the moral depravity of his conference, but his weakness as a leader. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.